We've reached the end of part 1. Let's summarize all the key principles we've dealt with thus far. Firstly, we spoke about the 95% of traders and why they happen to fail. So what we're going to do, what we would typically do is draw two columns. In the one column you'd have 95% of people, and the other column you would have 5% of people. Now what you want to do is you want to go highlight, not just today and what we've dealt with, but over time, all the characteristics that define those who succeed and those who don't succeed. So for example, 95% of traders that fail tend to take big losses. 95% of traders that tend to fail also tend to come into the markets every day with some form of a bias. 95% of traders who fail tend to have no edge. Then what we do on the other side is we try and highlight all the key characteristics that define traders that succeed in the industry. Firstly, they tend to have very strong routine. They tend to follow a very stringent set of rules. They tend to have a very process-orientated approach. And they have a very, very strong edge. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. The point of this is that you as a trader, as you go on in your career, as you spend time in the markets, you will pick up very quickly what are the things that cost you money and other traders. When you identify them, add them to the list of 95% of traders that fail. Equally, when you find certain characteristics amongst your peers or even within yourself that allow you to succeed as a trader, make sure you highlight them in the reasons for success. That way, over time, you'll very quickly pick up on what characteristics are required to succeed and what are required or what characteristics lead traders to failing. That was the first principle we dealt with. Then we moved on and we started to talk about the advantages of volume profiling. Now, I'm going to quickly highlight those advantages just so you can remember them. The first was we said that with volume profiling we can turn what is known as a very complex environment into a simple environment. We then also said that we can use volume profiling for very quick early pattern recognition observation. Okay, so by using volume profiling, we can very quickly not just notice patterns, but we can also then examine patterns over time. We also said that volume profiling is a forward-looking tool. So we noted that things like Fibonacci's and trend lines and support and resistance all tend to be lagging type tools, whereas volume profiling tends to be a forward-looking tool. We then also said that with volume profiling, we can have exact money management. And given that money management is so key in not just day trading, but all forms of trading, being able to manage your risk and your money management is highly crucial and one of the main advantages of volume profiling. And then we also said that it's not easy to automate all the volume profiling strategies, and as a result it means that volume profiling in the long run is a tool that can give you a sustainable edge going forward. So that was some of the advantages that we spoke about when talking about volume profiling. We then moved on to talk about what is volume profiling, what is the basic essence of volume profiling, and I think the best way to explain this is to illustrate it. The volume profile is nothing more than a distribution or a manner in which we can represent the three key variables, being price, being time, and being volume. And we noted that we'll have a set of prices on this side, we'll have a set of time being this entire distribution, and we'll have volume being dispersed over all these prices. And we said that in essence is the basic distribution. Now, if we were to just convert the just take a basic candlestick chart and convert it into some form of a distribution. Let's say, for instance, we had a traditional day where we saw candles going up, 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 and up. The distribution will show that. We'll just have lots of different distributions. So we would have effectively the distribution, and we'll see that over time the market will distribute, and wherever the market spends the most amount of time, so let's say the candlesticks came back and then went up and came back, where the market spends the most amount of time is where the distribution will become a little bit fatter. So there's nothing, using volume profiling is no different to candlesticks, it's just a different representation of the same information. All right, then we moved on and we started to talk about the future of volume profiling. Where is volume profiling going in the future? And why it's important that, if you learn the tool today, it will, stand you in good stead going forward into the future. And some of those advantages or some of the, the key characteristics we identified for the future of volume profiling was obviously one, because of the automation. In other words, volume profiling will teach you a set of principles, and algorithms cannot easily automate principles, and it's for that reason that the tool going into the future will survive. It won't be, if you look at a lot of modern day Fibonacci's and things that are very mathematical and exact, they're easily sort of automated. So because volume profiling is not as easily automated, it won't easily be, it will last into the future. We then also said that it's a strong forward-looking tool, and because of that, traders will tend to adopt this tool, going forward. And as a result, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that volume profiling will continue to exist and succeed as a form of developing edge and pattern recognition. So those were some of the characteristics defined about the future of volume profiling. We then moved on and we spoke about edge, and we spent a bit of time on this and how crucial it is to develop edge as a trader in order to succeed in this job. And one of the key highlights was we spoke about the steps to developing edge, and I'm just going to quickly go over those steps again, just refresh your mind. So those steps, first and foremost, was we want to recognize the pattern. So you have a profile or you have something that you've identified, you recognize a pattern that tends to play out more often than not. And we said that was step one. We then said once you recognize a pattern, something that makes sense to you, something that you're familiar with, and something you're observing quite often, we said you want to go and do a good old-fashioned Harry hindsight on that setup. So you want to take that type of pattern and go and look back in time. Go and try and find that pattern, as many observations of that pattern as you can find. Once you've done that, what you then want to go and do is you also then want to go do what we like to call a replay functionality. And all that is you try and find some form of recordings of how that pattern played out, so that you can define all the key characteristics of that pattern. You can do as many observations about that pattern. Once we've done that, you want to then go and set the conditions for the pattern. So you want to identify all the parameters and the conditions for that pattern, whether that means what time of day the pattern occurs to, or when it works best, what day of the week it works best, high volume or low volume conditions, out of hours or cash hours. All these sorts of conditions you want to identify about the pattern. You then want to go and set the rules for the pattern. So you want to outline the very parameters that will make this pattern successful. So create the rules. Where do you buy it? How do you execute? How many the prices are you looking for? How are you going to manage your risk? What sort of size are you going to be utilizing on this trade? When are you going to be taking this trade on? And then you want to go and test it. Okay, you want to use small size, test it with as smaller size as possible, and have a look what the results spit out, because it's the results ultimately that will determine whether or not we can scale up on this particular pattern. And then last but not least, number 7, we want to assess and upgrade. So important, guys. Right, too many people stop at step number 6. They start making money, they realize it works, and they stop, sort of advancing the setup and enhancing the setup. And as a result, eventually the setup starts to work maybe not as well. The probability of success starts to disappear a little bit, and then we just give up on the setup. And that's why you need to constantly be looking, how can you take this setup and constantly improve it so that the edge continues with that pattern. So that's what we spoke about with regards to the steps to developing edge as a trader. All right, we then went on and we spoke about the principle of objective versus subjective analysis. And I spent a bit of time on this for good reason, guys. You need to make sure that you understand this, because this for me is probably one of the most crucial principles that you need to learn as a trader. And very simply, we say that objective is very much fact-based, sort of type analysis. It's unbiased, it's unemotional. And we then said, if you go look at subjective, sorry, I should say subjective. So we have subjective there. So, and we said subjective is very much opinionated, and it's got a bias toward it, and it's feeling and intuition and all these ideas. I like to think of subjective as almost like ideas that we have in our head. And the crux of it, what we got to, we went through some really good examples. And what I want to get to is the crux, is this idea of the balance, okay? You need to find this happy balance between objectivity and subjectivity. Yes, it's good to have ideas. Yes, you need to, come in with all sorts of ideas as to, the fundamentals and the technical backdrop, and this could potentially happen and that could potentially happen. But in order to initiate on those ideas, you've got to have objectivity. If you do not have the objectivity, you haven't got edge. All you've got is an opinion, a bias, a hopefulness. Right? That's not good enough, guys. If you want to, make sure that you develop your edge and really succeed as at this job, you have to ensure you get the happy balance between subjective and objective. Alright guys, that is where we got to in part 1. So now that we've done summarizing part 1, it's time for you to go and test yourself on the principles we've discussed and complete the summary checker. Good luck.